not quite sure where to stand. This is a whole brand new setup for us. You can hear me all right? Yes? Hi, I'm Liz Zielinski. I'm the Dean of the Leonard Davis School, and I will be emceeing this very special event today, our memorial for Doris Westcott. Um, it was fun for me to see the developmental changes she goes through. I'm a developmental psychologist, so it's always interesting to see how times have changed, how fashions have changed, and how people's faces change. I'm sort of glad we don't have to wear white gloves anymore. It's been quite a while. One of the, so Today what we'll be doing is we'll be hearing some of the many different stories about Doris Westcott from people who've known her very well. We're collaborating in our event today with the Rossier School of Education because both gerontology and education were the beneficiaries of her generosity. Um, I think you've seen just in pictures, but just to tell you a little bit about Doris, while she was at USC, she earned both a bachelor's and a master's degree. She began to show her leadership qualities when she became Helen of Troy. I think that was her in the chariot being Helen. And in that capacity, she was a diplomat for the university. She had told people about how at that time she needed a costume to wear when she became Helen of Troy because she was the first one. And there were green, this sounds like Gone with the Wind, there were green velvet draperies in her residence hall, and they made an outfit for her out of those. So I guess it wasn't just, and this was before actually Gone with the Wind, I believe. During the First World War II, Doris was in the Waves, and she was the first woman in California to join the Waves. She was often in photographs to represent that group, and she also had the opportunity to meet Eleanor Roosevelt in the White House. After she graduated from USC, she ended up spending and doing the Waves. She spent her professional career in the Compton School District, where she was the principal of Compton High School for 17 years. During that time, she helped break racial barriers by hiring the district's first African American teacher, which is a rather amazing and brave thing to do at that time. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my experiences with Doris. I had the joy of knowing her only for a very short time in this very long life, and it made quite an impression for the little bit of time that I knew her. About 3 years ago, in this auditorium, we were having our scholarship donor event. It's called the State of the Center, where we talk about the Andrus Center, and we also honor our scholarship donors and recipients. At that time, I was introduced to her. She was a tall, rather frail lady. She had some difficulty walking down the aisle here, and she sat down, and I thought, oh, she seems like a sweet lady. And, you know, of course, I had all these little stereotypes in my mind about older people. And then she opens her mouth, and she was full of energy, she was dynamic, she was witty, she had the place in hysterics. It was quite amazing, and you know, somehow you think, gee, Helen of Troy, you think sort of demure, you know, especially from that era, and not sharp, not on target, and certainly not taking off. She just knocked everybody's socks off. I mean, people were just so amazed and impressed with her. And I thought, well, there's no stereotype of either a beauty queen, which she obviously was, or a frail elderly lady. She was a leader at a time when women were not really allowed to be leaders. And as a woman in her 90s, she still had those qualities. You couldn't tell, you know, just to look at her, you wouldn't know. And this is one of the things I just love about being in gerontology is you look at that elderly body and you have no idea what surprises are going to come out from that personality that resides in that body. And it was just pretty amazing. Now, at that occasion, Doris said to me that she was considering not coming to our scholarship event because she needed to use a walker to get around, and she was ashamed that anyone would see her needing one. But she decided that she shouldn't be ashamed because it was just her own personal pride that kept her from coming. And I thought, here's a lady in her 90s dealing with her own self-improvement, trying to get over her own ego problems. I mean, it was just so impressive. And so I was really, really amazed by that. And in my subsequent interactions with her, she was just always charming. She never wanted to talk about her physical problems. She only wanted to hear about the students. So it was really an amazing person for me to get to know. So basically, what I would consider with Doris's situation is that she was someone that I personally consider to have been successfully aging. Now, my colleagues in the field say successful aging has something to do with being healthy and mentally sharp and so on. But we don't always have control over those things. We can't control if we're going to have a stroke or other kind of medical problem, but we can try to overcome whatever physical limitations we have. And Doris was a shining example of that. So I thought that having the positive attitude that she had, focusing on others, being so generous to me, is what we all want to be throughout life, and especially in old age. So I am grateful to Doris, not just for her generosity in providing us an endowed scholarship to support our students, but for that precious gift of herself. Winston Churchill said, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." What a life she made. How many of us are so thrilled and happy to have known her and to have had the opportunity to interact with her on a regular basis. Now what I would like to do is to turn the program over to Dean Karen Gallagher, who is the Dean of the Rossier School of Education and the Emory Stoops and Joyce King Stoops Chair.
Thank you, Liz. A story is told about the great philanthropist Alfred Nobel, that sometime before he established his famed prizes, he was disillusioned by reading an obituary mistakenly written about him long before he actually expired. And his disappointment came in reading his biographical description as a brilliant chemist who had made a fortune as the inventor of dynamite. He was taken aback about how empty and insignificant his life seemed if those were his only claims to fame. He set out to leave a more laudable legacy by establishing the Nobel Prizes to acknowledge great human achievements. Nobel's nobility, if you will, is similarly in evidence in the life of Doris Westcott. Like Nobel, Doris realized that it is not what you get out of life, but what you put into it, and what you do to help others get the most out of it also, that is truly important. We can look at Doris's life and admire her success. More importantly, just as Mr. Nobel discovered, we must acknowledge something else, her significance. Noted ethicist Michael Josephson addresses the issue when he talks about the difference between success and significance. There is a transitory quality to success, he says, but immortality in significance. A life devoted to attaining personal goals can be admirable and satisfying, but it can be enormously enriched when we use our talents to improve the lives of others. You can see it in your program. You can see in your program, in the back of the program, the many ways Doris supported USC, its students, and our respective schools. But there is so much more to understand about her gifts. They were not merely monetary contributions. They were gifts of devotion. Each scholarship, each contribution, each dollar was given with such heart and soul, such personal care and meaning, that her fame as Helen of Troy took on much more significance in the years after she was so named than they did during the years she was a student. One of the themes we ascribe to in the Rossier School of Education is the importance of leadership. True leaders are catalysts to bold action. They teach, persuade, and inspire. They change minds and attitudes. The credentials of a great leader or a real leader are the list of things she reforms for the better. Doris Westcott then was a true leader. Doris led through example, whether in the classroom or school campus or during her famed military career. She was unrelenting in her determination to help others. I understand that when she was hospitalized last year, she made friends with several of her nurses, which is of course quite typical of Doris. But also typical of her heart and soul, she saw to it that each of the nurses acquired scholarships to finish their education, and she followed up with each one of them to make sure they were making progress. In his book, Living a Life That Matters, Harold Kushner writes, "Our souls are not hungry for fame, comfort, wealth, or power. Our souls are hungry for meaning, for the sense that we have figured out how to live so that our lives do matter, so that the world will be at least a little bit different for our having passed through it." Doris Westcott can rest easy. She made a difference in all of our lives, and we are all the better for it. Thank you.
You know what I'm doing. I'm going to talk to the light. I would now like to introduce Cesar Molino, who's going to be speaking. Okay. Doris mentored him while he attended Long Beach City College, where he received a Westcott scholarship. When he transferred to USC, he was awarded the Helen of Troy Scholarship. Cesar, is it Cesar or Caesar? Okay. He's a recent graduate of the Rossier School. Cesar? Caesar.
I would like to share a story that my girlfriend Melissa emailed me. The story that I'm about to read to you is about a lady named Rose and how she provided guidance to her friends. This story reminds me of our own friend Doris, as they both share so many admirable characteristics. In fact, I read it to Doris last year. She really liked the story. We both remarked how similar our friendship was to the friendship between the narrator and the story. So I'm going to read you the story. It's a short little story. The first day of school, our professor introduced himself and challenged us to get to know someone we didn't already know. I stood up to look around when a gentle hand touched my shoulder. I turned around to find a wrinkled little old lady beaming at me with a smile that lit an entire being. She said, "Hi, handsome. My name is Rose. I'm 87 years old. Can I give you a hug?" I laughed enthusiastically, responded, "Of course you may," and she gave me a giant squeeze. "Why are you in college at such a young, innocent age?" I asked. She jokingly replied, "I'm here to meet a rich husband, get married, and have a couple kids." "No, seriously," I asked. I was curious. What may have motivated her to be taking a challenge at her age? "I always dreamed of having a college education. Now I'm getting one," she told me. After class, we walked to the Student Union building and shared a chocolate milk shake. We became instant friends. Every day for the next 3 months, we would leave class together and talk nonstop. I was mesmerized listening to this time machine as she shared her wisdom and experience with me. Over the years, Rose became a campus icon, and she easily made friends wherever she went. She loved to dress up, and she revealed the attention bestowed upon her from the other students. She was living it up. At the end of the semester, we invited Rose to speak at our football banquet. I'll never forget what she taught us. She was introduced and stepped up to the podium. As she began to deliver her prepared speech, she dropped her 3x5 cards on the floor. Frustrated and little embarrassed, she leaned into the microphone, simply said, "I'm sorry, I'm so jittery. I gave up beer for Lent, and this whiskey's killing me." I'll never get my speech back in order to let me just tell you what I know. As we laughed, she cleared her throat and began, "We do not stop, we do not stop playing because we're old. We grow old because we stop playing. There are only four secrets to staying young, being happy, and achieving success. You have to laugh and find humor every day. You got to have a dream. When you lose your dreams, you die. We have so many people walking around who are dead and don't even know it. There is a huge difference between growing older and growing up. If you're 19 years old and lie in bed for one full year, don't do a productive thing, you will turn 20 years old. If I'm 87 years old and stay in bed for a year and never do anything, I will be 88. Anybody can grow older. That doesn't take any talent or ability. The idea is to grow up by always finding opportunity and change. Have no regrets. The elderly usually don't have regrets for what we did, but rather for things we did not do. The only people who fear death are those with regrets. She concluded her speech by courageously singing the rose. She challenged each of us to study the lyrics and live them out in our daily lives. In the, at the end of the years, at the year's end, Rose finished the college degree she had begun all those years ago. 1 week after graduation, Rose died peacefully in her sleep. Over 2,000 college students attended her funeral in tribute to the wonderful woman who taught by example that it's never too late to be all you can be. Mrs. Westcott also taught me the value of education and made me believe that one day I would be able to attend USC. I met her while I was a student at Long Beach City College. You see, for about 10 years, Ms. Westcott and Dr. Baxter have been looking for a student who would earn her scholarship at Long Beach City College and then transfer to USC and earn Mrs. Westcott's Helen Toy Scholarship. With the help of Dr. Baxter, I was able to be Doris Scholarship recipient at Long Beach City and at USC. But I'm pleased to say that I earned more than a scholarship. I was blessed with a mentor, a friend, and a Trojan mother, and a guardian angel. But of course, I wasn't the only scholarship recipient. There were many others. One of the things that I noticed about Doris was not only how kind and giving she was to donate so many scholarships, but also she was always interested in how her students were doing. I remember going to the hospital, about a week before she passed away. Here's a lady, in her last week, and I enter the hospital with my girlfriend, and she asked, "How are you doing?" That's the kind of person that she was. She always wanted to know how you were doing. Through my college years, I would visit her once a week to discuss my progress in my classes and hear about her experience at USC. And of course, I was delighted to know the Helen of Troy. Doris was a Trojan to the core. She introduced me to USC before I even got here. She constantly spoke about this Trojan family and the impact you all had in her life. I feel I personally know many of you in this room because through her stories, Doris talked about how grateful she was to have friends like you and to be part of the Trojan family. And I know that today she will be very proud to see all the Trojan family and friends here celebrating her legacy. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Leonardo Bacco who's the co-director of the Center for Multilingual and Multicultural Research at the Rossier School. Sure.
I'm very happy for everything everyone has said so far. It still doesn't really tell us what a great person she was. And I'm very honored to have known her generosity, and I hope to be able to live up to the role model that she was. I'm with the Rossier School of Education research professor, not the director of the Center for Multicultural Research. Many years ago, we had the 14th Foundation project that was designed to promote Latinos into the teaching profession. We were one of 4 projects in the nation. Even though we had a substantial amount of money, we're always looking for other money. Let me go to the mic. This mic? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. We had the Ford Foundation project, which you still can't hear me? Now you can't see me. I'm 6'5", you can't see me. That's pretty good. You can see me now? Okay. We're always looking when we have projects for extramural funds, always looking for sponsors. But Doris Westcott came to us. She contacted Michael Gienzik, a clinical associate professor of education and the founder of the original Latino Teacher Project. And she wanted to know how she could help Latinas become teachers. She was very interested in attending to many of the obstacles that she had to confront in becoming a teacher, as a woman and becoming a leader, and she wanted to find some way in which she could help. She genuinely contributed to our project, and in her honor, we created the Helen of Troy Award, which was to a Latina student going to USC, working as a teaching assistant in one of the surrounding schools in a bilingual program. And Doris wanted to make sure that we got someone who had good leadership qualities, recognizing that they're more than just a teacher, but they are a leader in the classroom and in the community. Someone who had exceptional, scholastic achievements, and someone who used rigorous, teaching techniques and who would embrace innovation. It's like, really talking about herself, really. And so we used that criteria to select the 13 Helen of Troy recipients. The first three, all at Magnolia Elementary School, went on to get master's degrees in English, in language learning and literacy, and one of them got it in the teaching of science. All three also spent 2 rigorous years of assessment so they could earn national board certification. This is the highest honor that you can give to any teacher in the country. I believe that's 3, another 5 of them also received master's degrees from Rossier School of Education or other universities. And one of them is now in her 2nd year in the doctoral program at USC. And she even dragged another teacher from Magnolia, and that dragged her, but in her leadership quality, she's also studying the EDD program this year as well. 2 of them were married with 2 children at the time that they got the award. And all of them demonstrate the leadership qualities that Doris wanted. She referred to them as her girls. We had an award ceremony in East Los Angeles every year in December. She came there every year except last year. She also communicated regularly with her girls, as she would call them, encouraging them to be leaders and to face adversity and to be strong. I feel very fortunate to have known her, and her legacy is carried on by the students who receive the Helen of Troy Award, and there are many more to come. I thank you all.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Larry Marquardt, who was a personal friend of Doris's.
Thank you. It's one thing to be the last speaker because you can say, well, the former speaker covered that factor. A number of the things that I was going to bring up have been covered, but anyway, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate all of you coming to honor Doris today. On behalf of my family, we would like to thank the USC Rossier School of Education and the USC School of Gerontology for hosting this celebration. A special thanks to Fred Baylock for preparing the slideshow and scanning of photographs from her scrapbook that she compiled when she was attending USC. Many thanks to Mickey Ferris and her staff for many hours spent organizing this event and sending out the invitations. I can't count the number of phone calls and emails that have been involved in having this affair for this afternoon, and you can tell by the planning that has been done by the department. The Gerontology department has prepared this marvelous program from cover to cover, and it has been massaged and corrected and several times, but it's a beautiful publication for you to keep in memory of Doris. How in 10 minutes can one cover the life of a 98-year-old who led such a colorful and meaning life? But I'll try in 10 minutes. Here's Doris the Trojan. I'm keeping to a script because I could talk for a long time. Doris was a physical education major with a minor in Spanish, and she was ahead of her time, I think, majoring in Spanish in 1926, 27. She was way ahead of her time. She used it all through her life. As a PE major, USC scheduled classes at the orthopedic hospital in connection with being a PE major. The classes were held in the carriage house of an estate on Flower Street because the main hospital had not been built. And today we have Joe Naylor and another person from the orthopedic hospital who have clued me in on some of this history. Dr. Lohman was one of the founders of Orthopedic Hospital and was Doris's instructor. Later in life, she spent several months at the orthopedic hospital because of a severe hip injury. And Dr. Lohman, her teacher, was still active in the hospital and would drop in to see Doris. She had an interest in athletics all of her life and spoke, as I said, Spanish fluently. She enjoyed using her Spanish and speaking with the waiters at Bixby Towers, where she lived for the last 8.5 years. She enjoyed tennis and encouraged our grandsons to take up the sport, which they did. Here it shows Doris in the high jump. This was an article apparently in the Los Angeles paper, not the Daily Trojan. The ancient Helen of Troy was content to let warriors do the fighting, but this modern Helen of Troy does her battling in person today at the University of Southern California, first inter-sorority track meet. She is Doris Tennant, shown making a high jump, and notice the outfit. It's a little different from the gym clothes of young ladies today. Fellow students selected her as the university's Helen of Troy. She was the first Helen of Troy from 1928 to 1929 and was elected again 1929 to 1930, and she's the only one who has had it for 2 years. Ironically, last Saturday, U.S. played Arkansas at Fayetteville, Arkansas. Doris was born in Fayetteville. In fact, I called Mickey Ferris and said, if you don't have TV on, you better watch this game because I don't know which side of the line Doris is on. But I'm sure if she were here today, her alliance would have been with USC. And if you watch the game, Arkansas was taken quite badly. I forget what the final score was. Doris's 1930 diploma from USC bears the signature of Rufus von Kleinschmidt, president, and Mr. Bovard, secretary to the Board of Trustees. And it was something to look at her certificate to see these two names. The diploma itself is a treasure. Helen of Troy. This photo appeared in the midweek pictorial, the New York Times, News of the World of Pictures, in the week of December 1, 1928. Notice it's 10 cents. The caption below, which you can't read, but I'll read it for you, was this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burnt the topless towers of Ilium? Helen of Troy recaptures in California in the person of Miss Doris Tennant, a student at the University of Southern California, who played the role of the most beautiful woman in history or romance in a pageant presented by the co-eds of the university. This picture generated a lot of correspondence to USC regarding the beauty of Helen of Troy. One man stated that he would like to come to California to meet her, and that letter is in the scrapbook that I've turned over to the university. Doris said, well, I think this has been covered. Dr. Selinsky, I think, covered it. But anyway, this was one of her favorite stories. The robe that she wore here that was a drape from the Elizabeth von Kleinsmith Residence Hall, where she lived, by the way. And the chariot was provided by one of the studios and lent to USC for this famous picture. And I think the blow-up is out in the patio. Doris married Jack Westcott because people will ask me, where did Doris Tennant pick up the name Westcott? Jack was a USC football star, about 6'5", and they were married in 1935 at the University Methodist Church. Jack played on the famous teams in the 20s with Howard Jones as the famous coach. Unfortunately, a few years after the war, the marriage terminated. Jack went in the Marines, Doris went into the Navy, and there was a separation there for several years, and it was one of the big disappointments of her life. Doris is loyal to USC to the end. She freely talked about being part of the USC anatomical program. So this was no big secret with Doris that she talked very freely about it. She wanted to do her part even. She says when they examine me, they're going to find a buckle of boats because she had 8 operations on the left hip and 1 on the right hip. And there were screws and wiring, everything holding her together. And if she hobbled down the aisle, you know why she was hobbling down the aisle. And speaking about the walker, she absolutely was adamant of not getting into a wheelchair. In fact, in the last year, through Medicare, we did get her a wheelchair, and she was adamant she was not going to go in a wheelchair. I think we only got her in her once, and that was to a family Christmas just last Christmas. But she was very proud. Doris the Wave is another chapter in Doris's life. The Navy in 1942 wanted to organize the Waves. For the first class of officers, they wanted mature women. They contacted leading universities for recommendations of women in their universities. Doris was recommended by Dean Crawford, who was the Dean of Women here at SC, even at 1942, and she was here with Doris in the 20s, and she recommended Doris. Doris graduated in 1942, the first class of Smith College at Northampton, Massachusetts, as a JG. Normally when you graduate, as I did, from midshipman school, you were an ensign, but they wanted this first class to really have mature women to launch the program. Doris eventually ended up in San Francisco as director of the Waves for 11 states with thousands of waves under her command. The next picture shows Doris with she's a full commander, for those of you who are not familiar with stripes in the Navy. The 3 stripes here is a full commander, and the person she's talking to is a lieutenant commander. It's 2 full stripes with 1 in the middle, and the next step being get. I don't have a clue what they were talking about, but anyway, it was one of the responsibilities that she had. That when she first went to San Francisco to be the director of the Waves for the 12th Naval District, an admiral said, well, go out and buy a hotel. She says, we got to house these women someplace here in San Francisco. So he gave her authorization to go out and buy a hotel, which she did, and all the Waves were stationed there. And if I'm correct in this statement, Dr. Franklin's wife was a Wave, and she was housed when she was in the Waves in this building that Doris purchased in about 1942 when she went to San Francisco. It's already been mentioned that she did have a tea with Eleanor Roosevelt when she was back in Washington. She'd go to Washington quite often in relationship to her position, and Eleanor Roosevelt wanted more information to know how women in the military, and especially the waves, could relieve men to go to the war zone. And that was the main purpose of having the waves and the WACs, the women on the home front, so to relieve men to the battlefields. She talked quite often about having, and it was a one-to-one T, apparently. In the end, when she served in the Navy from 1942 to 1946, and she received a presidential citation when she retired. Doris, the passionate teacher, the mentor, and administrator. Here is yours truly in my younger days. You spoke about the gerontology people. There was only 14 years difference between me and Doris passed away at age 98. So I'm kind of pressing up there, and I guess there's still some fire in the furnace, hopefully. Doris was first a classroom teacher of mine, and then she became vice principal at Willowbrook, and she was the advisor to the student council, and I was the student body president, not one semester, but 2 semesters, so Doris and I got well acquainted. We formed a friendship which has lasted 70 years. I hope you can read this. Typical of Doris, always writing something to inspire somebody. And she wrote this in my annual in June of 1938. I want to point out the handwriting. Handwriting seems to be a disappearing art in this day and age. With all the computers and such, that young people are not learning penmanship. But Doris always had a beautiful penmanship right to the end. She always took an interest in her students, which followed through to her last days, which has been demonstrated here today already. We had a lot in common. Doris's birthday was March the 21st, and mine was March the 20th. So we used to get together and celebrate our birthday. I went into the Navy, and she went into the Navy. I was here at USC in the Navy D-12 program, which was a pre-officer training program, and I lived on campus. In fact, I ate 3 meals in town and gown. That was just a cafeteria for the Navy and Marines. As an ensign, I saw Doris in San Francisco as my ship left for the South Pacific. In 1946, after the war was over, I saw her again in San Francisco. I graduated from USC in 47. Doris and I drove together to USC, taking courses for a master's degree. She would jokingly say, well, Larry, I got you through junior high school and high school. Now you can help me get my master's at USC, because she'd been out for about 15 or 20 years and coming back. I too taught for the Compton School District at Roosevelt Junior High School before joining the LAUSD. Doris, the picture here is when she was principal of Compton High School. The Compton High School was reinvented in 1953 when the Compton district kind of disintegrated the secondary part. In fact, there's a gentleman here today who remembers those days in 1953. Linwood withdrew. It was a junior high. They got their own district. Paramount withdrew. They came their own district. So when all that happened, they were recreating Compton High School as a 4-year institution. She had to reorganize it with many, many challenges in those days. Some of the teachers taught on the junior college campus, and they were left behind at the high school. Some of them were really junior college teachers, and they went. So there was a lot of challenges there for Doris to conquer. One of her students at the Compton High School is here today, Clifford Smith. Clifford, would you wave your hand? And I think afterwards, when we meet in the patio, that you'd be happy to converse with Clifford. Wendy Slothauer, as I knew her, was a next-door neighbor to Doris's, and I remember Wendy when she was a little girl. David Slothauer, her father, taught bookkeeping, as I recall, at the high school, and her mother was a teacher also for the comp. So she read the paper about today's event. In speaking to the LA Times obit department, a lady there by the name of Mrs. Quinn told me her parents went to Compton High School when Doris Westcott was the principal. I sent the obit in, and then we had to talk and negotiate and so forth. When's it going to run? And she said, by the way, my parents went to Compton High School when Doris was the principal. Then she said, and my grandmother attended Willowbrook, and she told me the years, and that's when I was a student there also. So the lady's grandmother was a student at Willowbrook when I was there. All I can say is it's a small world when you're on the telephone talking to somebody in Los Angeles and they know the person that's there. Philanthropies. Doris the philanthropist. You've heard today, and I won't reiterate, but she has made so many endowments that it's most impressive. Here are some of the students that have received her scholarships. In later life, her scholarship students became the light of her life. She would glow when talking about her students. We have received many notes of appreciation from them since her passing. The article in last day's Monday's LA Times stated that Doris left no survivors. That's not quite so. I look upon all of us here today as a survivor of Doris Westcott. People have asked, how did Doris accumulate so much money on an educator's salary? Well, we all know that it's difficult. I'm a former teacher and principal at LAUSD. But Doris was lucky. She had inherited some property from Arkansas Farms. She originated from Arkansas and invested wisely in an investment company. And it has flourished, and in the process, SC and all these other institutions have profited by her wise investments. I'd like to close. Well, here they are. I guess they weren't up there before. You can see what an impressive. All except the last three were for scholarships at these institutions. Long Beach City College, California Retired Teachers, Mexican American Alumni Association, USC Rossier School of Education, and the SC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. And I don't see orthopedic. Did I read? Yeah, orthopedic at the bottom with no scholarships. I'd like to close by showing Doris's extended family. This was taken at a family gathering, and we're all seated here on the front row. Doris was around when Vicki and Cindy were born, her two daughters, and became part of our family through the years, joining us for family holidays and functions. When grandchildren started coming along, she was very generous in starting a college fund at birth and added to the fund at each birthday. She has always been known as Auntie Doris to the children. At this point, I'd like Phyllis to come up and read a closing poem. We found this poem in Doris's file in vacating her apartment. We felt she left this for us to find. I don't know. And to share it as such an occasion as this. Phyllis will read this in closing.
It's called Miss Me But Let Me Go. When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in gloom-filled rooms. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that we once shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all a part of the Master's plan, a step on the way to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, Go to the friends we know, and bury your sorrows in doing good. Miss me, but let me go.
Thank you, Phyllis. I'd like for my family to stand and face the audience, please. This is Doris's extended family. They've come up, most of them today. I think the children are in school, but they played hooky for the second half of the day, but they got there for the attendance count, and that counts for the ADA. Thank you. You may be seated. We'll be outside later on if you'd like to chit-chat. There are so many stories that I could tell if you've ever visited with Doris. I think I have to close with one favorite one. It was her San Quentin story. When she was in San Francisco as the director of the Waves, the warden Duffy, very famous, and back then, and I'm dating myself, but there's a radio program called Time in My Hands that the inmates would sing, and part of it was a bona fide program. So Warren Duffy, got the idea that he wanted to have some Waves come over because they had a choir, chorus of Waves girls, young ladies. And there were 2 buses, so it took 2 buses to get them over to San Quentin. And the first bus had arrived, and Doris was on the first bus, and the second bus hadn't arrived, so there were some problems. There were no walkie-talkies or cell phones in those days to know where it was. So all the inmates were in the auditorium or wherever they were, and they were up on the stage. And so Warren Duffy turned to Doris and said, "Would you like to address the inmates?" She kind of gulped and thought, well, I've talked to a lot of students, but I've never talked to a whole room of inmates. So she got up, and she could talk, as we know Doris could do. And she talked about the Waves program and what they were doing and so forth. And by that time, the second bus arrived, and the program ensued. We have a picture of Doris with Warren Duffy and some of the girls, young ladies, in the chorus. And it's one of our favorite pictures with Doris with Warden Duffy at San Quentin. Thank you very much, Dr. Zelinsky. I'll turn it over to you. Get all my stuff out of the way.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, what I'd like to do at this point is to invite everyone outside to the patio for refreshments. We're going to have an open mic session outside so that you can share your own stories that you may have about Doris. And we'll see you outside in a couple of minutes.